So anyways, maybe we'll get into junior hockey with Dregs. Let's go out to Southern Ontario now. TSN NHL insider Darren Dreger joins us. And Dregs, good day, sir. The NHL GM meetings were Friday, and I don't know if it carried into the weekend, but I did not see a ton of coverage coming out of them. Or did I miss it?
No, you didn't miss it. There wasn't a whole lot to report on, to be fair. It was essentially an update meeting, and there wasn't much of an update. It was an opportunity for the Commissioner's Office, hockey operations with Colin Campbell, Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly would have been involved, to just pass on the latest information that the National Hockey League might have, in relation to what they hope will be sooner rather than later, the start to the 2021 season. But they haven't taken their eye off the target, which is early January, but most around the game believe that that is optimistic. And maybe best case scenario is drifting into late January, even into February. So the GMs had lots of questions, specifically developmentally, worried about major junior hockey. If you've got a draft pick, a recently drafted player, and that player, if we use Ontario, the OHL as an example, and the suggestion that the OHL return without having any contact-free, body-checking free, well, is that an environment that the OHL would even consider coming back to? And I don't believe that it would. But there's a lot of ongoing dialogue between major junior hockey and the provincial governments and likewise the federal governments, along with the health authorities who have to be involved in these discussions. But NHL general managers want to know what that landscape looks like. They want to know what the American Hockey League might look like, because again, there's so many ladders of development all the way up to playing full-time in the National Hockey League that need to be observed here. And the NHL brass didn't have a lot of answers on Friday for the GMs.
I get it. I hope people are learning stuff through this process. For instance, when the WHL announced the transfers of players to the SJ and Junior A last week, NHL scouts were blowing up my phone saying which players are going, which leagues, where are they going, because they want to watch these guys. I don't think fans understand how they all work together. You just, talked about it right there, but I hope people are realizing how everybody is literally in it together. Now, last summer when we were reporting, or actually you were, and I was picking your brain on the return to play, and they actually did return to play. Yeah. Did you not think we were out of this, Dregs, that we would not be going back to where we are right now?
I didn't officially, but I understood why they wanted to condense the playoffs so that they could build in a little bit more of a window in the event that there would be a second wave. And we're in the second wave of COVID-19. What I don't think anybody is able to determine is, where are we in the second wave? Are we in the beginning stages, the middle, hopefully towards the end? I don't think that any of the specialists have a direct answer for that just yet. But I think it was wise by the NHL approaching the return to play in the way that they did, getting the Stanley Cup awarded as quickly as they were able to, so that you could have this full shutdown period. Again, let's hope the numbers start dropping. It seems unlikely that that's going to happen anytime soon. And by soon, I'm talking about the weeks ahead. But if they do, then maybe a December return for training camp isn't out of the question. And a January start to the regular season isn't out of the question. But again, we don't know that yet, Rod. The commissioner of the National Hockey League, Gary Bettman, doesn't have those answers. But they were advised appropriately, as we're living now, to make sure you build in as much time in terms of a break between the Stanley Cup and when you might return and when it might be safe and healthy enough to do that for training camp. It seemed like they'd have an appropriate and ample amount of time, but they may not. But they'll use the time wisely, and they will take their time. You're not going to hear the commissioner come out anytime soon and say, well, we're being advised that we're not going to be able to start in December or January. He's not going to do that until he's absolutely certain that they're going to have to push back their target date of early January.
What is your make on the World Juniors? I think one update I saw out of the weekend was that scouts were told they weren't going to be allowed to go. And you know yourself, they don't want to scout off a monitor or a TV if they don't have to. Do you think it's worth it to play the tourney if nobody can get in?
Well, yes, because even though it's wrong in so many ways, to not have fans in the building is going to be difficult, but you've already seen it in practice. obviously in handing out the Stanley Cup. That was a unique circumstance, but the Tampa Bay Lightning aren't complaining. They'd rather have had a normal circumstance, but that just wasn't the reality of the situation. It feels like if the World Juniors can go forward, that it would be good for the IIHF. It would be good for the sport to have these young men competing on the world stage as they do on an annual basis. And given the fact that they just played the Stanley Cup playoffs inside a bubble in Edmonton, they made it feel, they being the National Hockey League, as normal as they could. So I'm going to assume that Hockey Canada is just flat out going to steal everything that was learned from the experience of the National Hockey League. There's a big if here, though, Rod. If the world can stay healthy enough in Alberta and in Middle Europe and around North America so that all of these teams can come into Edmonton by December 13th, that's actually the date I believe that everybody is watching, because that's the date that the chartered aircraft are expected to land in Edmonton. So Hockey Canada says that they're planning as if they're going to host the World Juniors. There was a call late last week with the IIHF, not just specifically about the World Juniors, but about all of the international properties. But it was brought up. There are concerns in Europe with COVID-19, as there should be. So there's concern around the World Juniors in Alberta. There's no doubt about that. But similar to the conversation we just had about the National Hockey League, it's just too early to suggest that they're getting close to pulling the pin. But if they have to host this event and they've got to streamline who can get in that building, including not having a large portion of the media, not having scouts allowed to come into that building, then they're going to do that, because priority is to host the World Junior Championship and worry about the restrictions that going into that as a secondary issue.
I'm glad to hear you say that. For me to say, is it worth playing the tournament? Dumb comment by me as a hockey guy. Yes, it's worth it. The ratings will be boffo. Everybody's going to be home. Like, listen, I get it. But yeah, a logistical nightmare that I don't think people really understand. John in Winnipeg says, Darren Dreger, is this NHL Canadian division going to happen? Thoughts?
Well, I would say this to John and everybody else who's wondering about it, since it's been openly speculated. Team gather steam a week, 10 days ago, but the speculation of a Canadian division has been out there for a while. I would say that even in the latter stages of the Stanley Cup playoffs, there were starting to be whispers of what 2021 might look like. First of all, everything is attached to, again, the border crossing. And some believe that the presidential election in the United States may have some influence. If Trump, returns to the president's office, then maybe Prime Minister Trudeau keeps the borders locked down. But a lot of that can be governed simply by the coronavirus numbers that we already talked about. How can you, get going in a regular season if you don't have full border crossing? So the Canadian division makes a lot of sense. But then you have to look at COVID-19 here in Canada. And, yesterday the numbers in Ontario were staggering. They were over 1,000. Today they're under 1,000. But the Quebec numbers aren't very good. And you look at the cities. It's Ottawa, it's Toronto, it's Montreal. And then you look at how the virus is starting to take hold in Western Canada as well. So, these are areas of deep concern. So, yes, the Canadian division is a possibility. But for me, Rod, all of it's going to be boiled down into scenarios, and all of it is going to have a financial attachment to it. I believe that Commissioner Bettman is going to present the owners with a number of scenarios, maybe as few as 3. And it could be, well, how much money are we going to lose if we don't play at all, if there isn't a 2021 season? Nobody wants that, but you have to do your research on that. How much money are we going to lose if we play 80 games, 82 games without fans in the building? How much money are we going to lose if we start playing the regular season without fans, but at a certain point, a percentage can come back in? And then maybe towards the later stages of the regular season, more fans can come back into that building. I believe that the National Hockey League is doing its due diligence on those economic spins right now. And that's the primary reason why the NHL hasn't really engaged wholeheartedly with the NHLPA and its assembled committee, which includes 10 NHL players, to negotiate what the 2021 season is going to look like, because Commissioner Bettman and the National Hockey League are still boiling down the economics club by club in the NHL. But yes, a Canadian division could be part of a return to play.
I think we have 3 minutes left, and I got two questions. One, I saw Pierre LeBrun's report that the worst case scenario is $1.8 billion out of revenue next year. How does that affect salaries?
Yeah, well, it really shouldn't, or it doesn't. That's somewhat gray in terms of the number of games that would have to be played for players to achieve full salary. Could the National Hockey League go back to the players and say, look, we negotiated the collective bargaining in good faith. It was all based on the premise of an 82-game regular season. We clearly can't play that. The agents that I'm talking to, nobody wants that. Obviously, that's why everybody wants to play as many games as possible, because the players want to get paid, and they want to be paid in full. They are getting a nice little bump, though, I would say, and I think it has to be payable by Saturday, October 31st. Everybody under contract, player-wise, gets an 8.1% paycheck from the 2021 season. So the owners are going to have to pay that for every player under contract, even though the owners aren't taking in any money. But the whole idea of, well, what happens if you play 60 games or you play fewer than 60 games, whatever that number is, that seems to be a little bit cloudy in terms of getting a real direct answer. Here's what it is. Yes, the players get full salary versus no, it would have to be prorated. So that one is to be determined.
Wow. And here's one to make you feel good. I saw Dingman put on Twitter that he used to sit beside you on the bus. Give me one instance that you remember about. The guy's like a man-child. How did you fit in there?
Well, that's why I replied the way I did. I actually had half a seat, and Dinger had, a seat and a half. Now, you know what? In fairness, he was a great seatmate. We had lots of laughs, except when the Wheat Kings would lose, and then nobody could talk, right? You've been on those buses, Rod, many, many times when the team lost, and you literally had to just...
With that coach, by the way.
You had to stare out the window, right, and just pretend like... But... we would stop at varying places for pizza on the way home, right? That was the post-game meal. And Dinger had this figured out. The kid was 6'4", 220 pounds at 16 years of age. He could eat like no one I'd ever seen before. So, the broadcasters aren't burning the fuel that these guys are. So I'd eat like half a large pizza, so something like that, right? And I'd save the other half for Dinger, and I'd take it I'd give it to him on the bus. So I had lots of fun with Chris Dingman on the bus.
Those are great times, great times. Dregs, always appreciate you fitting us in. Wonderful update today. Thank you, sir. Stay safe out there, and we're following closely, as you can tell.
All right. Thanks for having me, Rod.
TSN NHL insider Darren Dreger from his home office.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.